my friend, the late Sammy Allred. You know, Sammy was one of the great KVED DJs we ever had. I hope that someday we'll be able to recognize Sammy even more for this great institution. Thank you again to the Country Radio broadcasters and the selection committee for this great honor. I don't know if I'm worthy. I really don't, but I do thank you. And I would also love to thank my family for making the journey from West Texas. My dad, Bob, the original Bob Pickett, is over there, 80 years old. Some of those late shifts in Sweetwater, Dad would drive the pickup and throw my bicycle in the back and take me home. That's dedication right there. And thank you, Dad, for doing that. I also want to thank my sister, Debbie, and her husband, Don, the best cotton farmer and rancher in West Texas, for making the trip tonight to share this special event with us. You know, looking back at my, hard to believe, nearly 45 radio year career, I do have a lot of people to thank, and I hope I didn't forget anybody up there. I did, I apologize. Now, I've also admitted I've had a lot of program directors at KVED Case in the past 35 years, right? I told them that I just came with a building, and I hope they took that as I was part of the foundation for KVED Case many, many years. But seriously, my love of radio, my love of country music, it's given me the best education ever. As Bob Cole mentioned in the intro, it was my love of outlaw country back in the 70s, and especially Jerry Jeff Walker's Viva Terra Lingua that made me want to come to Austin. Has anybody seen the Outlaws and Armadillo's exhibit? Isn't that great? It's like taking a trip back in time. Went to see it today, and listen, for the first time today, I got my first senior citizen discount, so today's going pretty good, you gotta admit, right? So I remember walking into my first radio station in Austin and going in the music library, and I'm sure you guys remember this. Everything was vinyl back then. It was a treasure. And back in those days, you had to show up an hour early and pull all the albums and the music before you could do your air shift. I would show up 3 or 4 hours early, and I'd go through that vault. I would start at the A, since where Sleep at the Wheel was, and work my way down to the W's for Waylon and Willie. And that is the best education. I mean, you read the back of the albums, it was like a book. You learned about the singers, you got to read the lyrics, you learned about the artist, where the songs came from. It was just the best education ever. And I think that helped me make the connection with the listeners. They would tune in. And my first big shift was the overnight shift, which I love because you could also connect to the listeners besides the people calling up drunk on their way home from the clubs, right? The artists back then, after they did a show in Austin, they would call up and thank the listeners for coming out to the show. I remember many times that Reba would call after doing a show in Austin. And also, I was the guy that volunteered to work Christmas morning. Not that I didn't want to go home and see my family in West Texas, but I was the guy. And I remember Holly Dunn, whose father was a preacher in Austin, would always call up Christmas morning and spend some time with me. And get this is a true story. George Strait once wrote a letter, a note to my boss explaining that I was late because I would not get off his tour bus in San Marcos. Let me say, I proudly have that excuse note. Didn't give it to my boss, I showed it to him, but that note is hanging up framed in my office today. Seriously, I would like to really thank my mom, who we lost about 16 years ago, but I know that she's here in spirit. Mom's the one that encouraged me to get out of my comfort zone and to go down and apply for the radio station in Sweetwater. I was 15 or 16 years old. Mom made me buy an old reel-to-reel recorder when I was about 10, and I'd go up and down the neighborhood interviewing people and taping songs off the radio. And one of the first songs that I taped, I remember, was Mr. Bojangles, written by Jerry Jeff Walker, and that turned me on to Jerry Jeff Walker's music right there. But I really, really miss my mom, but I do feel her presence here tonight, and hope you do too. I took Mom to the CMA Awards one time after we won one of our Station of the Year awards. And again, this is a true story. Well, I'm up there with Dan Halliburton, getting ready to accept the award. Halliburton was giving it to us. I look in the back, and there's this white-haired gentleman talking to my mom, and he is just flirting with her, talking back and forth. My mom was just giggling, and I'm up here, and finally, when it was over, my mom said, "Who was that gentleman? He was nice. He just wouldn't leave me alone. He kept talking to me." And I said, "Mom, you know the songs I Fall to Pieces, Tiger by the Tail, Heartaches by the Number?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Well, you've just met Harlan Howard." And boy, that is 3 chords to the truth right there. I'm not making that up right there. I could tell you more stories, but I know my mom is telling me to wrap it up right now. But I got to tell you one thing about country radio and country music. What really brings me to tears and joy is knowing that my passion and love of country music has been passed down to my 2 sons who are back in Austin tonight, Ethan and Wyatt. And nothing is like hearing Ethan play a George Strait song on his guitar and then hearing Wyatt trying to sing along. It really makes a dad proud. And as we like to say in the Pickett household, keep it country. True story. And also, being here tonight reminds me much of the evening about 10 years ago when my mentor, longtime boss, and Country Radio Hall of Famer Ron Rogers was inducted. Now, as always, Mr. Rogers, we called him Coach. He always gave us a terrific and gracious acceptance speech. And yesterday, as Sarah and I were landing here in Nashville, on Southwest Airlines, by the way, as we were landing, I looked out the window and I recalled so well, so vividly, exactly what Mr. Rogers reported to us that night. And I felt those same emotions. Mr. Rogers, 10 years ago, as he was inducted, shared with us that as he and Pam, his wife Pam, were landing in Nashville back in 2011, that he found himself totally overcome by tears and emotion. And now I know exactly what he was experiencing that night. So yesterday, as we're landing, I turned to my beautiful wife, Sarah, of 21 years. "Hi, Sarah." And I asked her, I said, "Sarah, look, there's Nashville, Music City, USA. There's the Ryman. There's the Cumberland River. This is the home of country music. This is so cool." Sarah, in your wildest dreams, did you ever think that we'd be flying in here one day and that they would be inducting me in the Country Radio Hall of Fame and that Keith Urban and it was going to be there and Garth Brooks, and we found out tonight? And Sarah just looked at me, deep in thought for several seconds, and she said, and I'll never forget this, she said, "I'm sorry, Bob, but you're not in any of my wildest dreams." Yeah. Seriously, thank you for letting me be a part of the class of 2021. And one gentleman who's sitting at my table, how many guys get to do this? This is a man who hired me when I was 15 years old, signed the paperwork. He's here with his wife, Cindy, Mr. Johnny Moore. Johnny, you mind coming up here right now and help me do the honors? I asked Johnny, I said, "Why did you hire me? I mean, you guys heard the air check, right?" And he said, "Well, Bobby, I knew that you would show up for work." And I'm so glad that he's showing up tonight to help me with this honor. Thank you again. Thank you, Country Radio. Bob Pickett.